In Romania, the parliament just adopted a law that makes vaccination mandatory and stipulates that parents and legal guardians who refuse vaccination will be fined. What are the regulations in the United States in this field?
It's not compulsory in the United States, which has changed because when I was in grade school, we all were vaccinated at school. They just lined us up, we went in, we got our shot. And nobody questioned it because that's just the way it was. Now, I think if the US were to adopt a law like that, we would go through some controversy as well.
Have you an explanation why people don't trust in vaccination now, more than, for example, 20, 25 years ago?
Right. Well, I think there's a couple of things going on. One, ironically, is that I think that in some ways we're a victim of our own success. I was very young, but I'm old enough now to remember that I had a cousin in my family who was a victim of polio. And he was like one of the last generations to actually suffer polio. People since then have not seen it, nor have they seen large measles outbreaks and so forth. Obviously, as Romanians know now, measles has been a real recent problem. And so maybe because they've seen that, it might be less abstract. But I think there's a lot of people, certainly in the United States, that they haven't seen a disease, and so they, I guess, at some point don't believe they're vulnerable to it, or they don't even understand how devastating some of those diseases can be or how deadly they are. And so that's part of the problem. And then I think the other part of the problem, at least in the United States, and perhaps something like that is going on here, is that there have been some fairly prominent people, celebrities, who, for example, Jenny McCarthy, who is a popular culture figure. Her child came down with autism when he was around two and a half years old. And she was convinced, because of the timing of it, that it was a vaccination that caused that problem. It wasn't. And they've done extensive research, and there really is no scientific relationship. But she just wasn't going to believe that. And so there are some people, because autism is on the rise, and so they're looking for answers, and just because of the coincidence of timing with some of these people, they say, oh, it must be this, when in fact it really wasn't. But when famous people start to say things, there's going to be folks that listen to them. And a lot of times too, that those types of people will get more viewership than people that will attend to news or more serious program. And so sometimes the least educated in a population are also the less likely to listen to legitimate news sources. And so as a result, they're getting more information from popular culture figures who are probably very entertaining, probably not very scientific.
But who must be the leader in this case of health journalism? Because companies, for example, can be suspected they are interested to develop the profit.
Right.
Okay, the doctors perhaps in the same situation. So who will be the leader who can be trusted?
Right. Well, I think in part it's going to be a collective effort. I think that individual physicians in the United States still have a lot of trust among society. I think that university experts remain a trusted source, and maybe in some ways more, because they're not, there's not as many opportunities for them to take graft or to take payoffs. And so I do think that those kinds of experts with trust need to really stay steady with their communication. But again, I think that's a serious threat. I think it is in the United States as well, because ultimately, you know, a lot of industries where there's a lot of money involved, and pharmaceuticals is certainly one of those, can ultimately have a corrosive effect. And it's interesting when you look at the numbers of people that are lobbying, like in Washington, D.C., The pharmaceutical industry is one of the largest. It's very well financed. They're constantly trying to influence legislation in their direction and often succeeding. And it's difficult too because pharmaceuticals are vitally important. They serve a very important function. But I think like anything else where there's a lot of money involved, there's also a lot of temptation.